Western civilization is diseased. The disease is spreading. The question is whether or not it's terminal. I still hold out some hope, though I think we're going to hit hard times. I want to be very specific in this video and connect some ideas for you. Have you ever heard an atheist use the term SKYDADDY?
SKYDADDY Jesus does not exist and will not come back to save your ass. If SKYDADDY Jesus existed, why he didn't stop the abuse? Who gave you that SKYDADDY Jesus to worship? Well, Mr. Charlie and the gang who enslaved us took away our culture and identity.
Every time when you try to commit a sin, just remember the big SKYDADDY is up there. He's looking over everyone. So if you try to commit a sin, you might get punished.
Usually always the people who use this term are not particularly thoughtful. I've never seen anybody who's particularly well read use it. It's very common amongst internet atheists. People drop it like it's this original, brilliant, witty thought. But I want to talk about the origins of that. I don't mean to be insulting to you if you're an agnostic or call yourself an atheist, and you're a reasonable person who's just not sure about these things. Obviously, they mean by this that people who believe in God or the sacred or the transcendent have imaginary friends or an imaginary friend who lives in the sky. And you just need a dad. But I'll never be convinced by your paltry evidence for this imaginary friend, which is a category error, because that's not actually what most people, intelligent people, mean by the word God. It's not a being who lives in the sky or in space. So it's kind of silly, but where did this idea come from? The academic version. Philosophers don't operate in isolation. Ideas in academia and philosophy that bleed out into art, into culture, into our everyday lives are engaging with each other. I'm going to lay out what I think. I don't mean to offend you. I'll trust that you're a mature person and that you can handle it and agree or disagree. After the Reformation into the Enlightenment, there were a lot of fragmentation in the academy. Sometimes atheists forget that the university is something that originated primarily in Christendom. Oxford University, others are, Plato has his academy, some Islamic folks had religious education centers, but the university as we know it originated in Christianity. They forget that. The ideology, the philosophy and theology fragmented after the Reformation. Beliefs about religious authority, epistemic authority, sort of all began, it's like a tapestry that the threads began to be pulled, and the tapestry of our intellectual underpinnings, cultural underpinnings, all began slowly to be unraveled. German philosophy and theology are tied together, and they've been extremely influential, even on the United States. I want so badly to go into detail here, but I will refrain and just give you the snippets. We're going to go from the philosophy to the meme and show why I rejected all of this. Those of you who don't know, I did struggle with whether or not God exists, and if you've deconstructed, I can relate to you. But what I would say is you can reconstruct to something richer, fuller, deeper, older even. Immanuel Kant was a famous philosopher in the Germanic areas of the world, had the idea of transcendental idealism. He believed in the transcendental. I think he was trying to recover what was being lost in epistemology and how we know things about the world. I think he was trying to recover or maintain some sense of the sacred, of the transcendent, as it was rapidly being lost in the West in his time in, let's say, the late 1700s. Hegel is another philosopher, same part of the world, basic part of the world, and he believed in dialectics. Now, dialectic is reason, a way of reasoning or discussing, but for Hegel, he saw this as reasoning and discussing between ideas, wrestling, fighting themselves out in civilization over time. And this became an idea of progress. He thought that someone would have a thesis and an antithesis. These aren't the words he used, but these are the words teachers usually use to describe Hegel's thought. Someone has an idea, someone has rather the opposite idea. They fight it out. Eventually, through this conflict, they form a synthesis or a synthesis in which you have a higher form of that idea. That's a bit simplistic, but that's sort of close. This, over time, is the progress of ideas. So you could imagine that historic Christianity is something to be left behind. It's holding up the progress of the academy, of culture. This was very influential on philosophy, art, theology. I want to give you some specifics here. I know I kind of go up to a bird's eye view. I want to zoom back in and give you some specifics here. There was a man named Ludwig Feuerbach. I think most people fail to understand how influential this man was. He sort of did a materialistic inversion of what Hegel was saying. Hegel still believed, in some sense, in the immaterial. Feuerbach inverted it and turned it back towards the material. And so, with religion as this idea, the idea of God, he points this back downwards to the human. He says a lot of things, but he says, God, that is, as a being not finite, not human, not materially conditioned, not phenomenal, is only an object of thought. He thought that God was sort of the antithesis of humanity. Man is finite, we imagine God is infinite, etc. This is not a scientific view, this is a view that developed in philosophy, contrary to what some atheists would think. But this was immensely influential. Feuerbach didn't come up with these ideas on his own. He's engaging with the ideas already present in the cultural, philosophical zeitgeist. Since the 1600s, there was already a trend towards deism, towards materialism, towards atheism. A few specific examples of how this played out in cultural theology and philosophy. In Wagner's opera, The Ring Cycle, a Germanic composer, great friends with Friedrich Nietzsche, he imagined the gods, but for Wagner, the gods are sort of psychological projections. Humanity must learn to live in the wake of the death of their gods and recover some sense of the sacred, is sort of what Wagner thought in engaging with Feuerbach and I think Kant. This played out in theology, and a gentleman named Adolf von Harnack, he was asking the question, what is Christianity? If we're simply progressing towards greater understanding of all these things, of humanity, human nature, human rights, society, how to have a civil government and a peaceful society, von Harnack thought that Christianity had changed from the pure, simple religion that it had began as and had been perverted by Catholicism. It had been Hellenized. It had been blended with Greek philosophy. And essentially, he was trying to get back to what is Christianity. So he rejects many of the core doctrines that even Orthodox Protestants, Catholics, or Eastern Orthodox Christians would hold to. He thought that Luther rightly rejected the views of sacraments that Christians had historically held because these were superstitions to von Harnack. But here's the thing, at the absence of religious authority, who was to say? German theology tended more and more, with men like Schleiermacher, to be more naturalistic. By the way, I grew up with Baptist influences in my life, many of which for which I'm grateful. The Baptist and the fundamentalist, more broadly, movement began as a reaction against this exact type of theology. It was called theological liberalism, which is essentially seen as a blending of modernism, naturalism, deism, reductionism with Christianity. These are the trends that are happening in philosophy, culture, the zeitgeist, if you will. Come now to Sigmund Freud. What part of the world is he from, by the way? He takes Feuerbach's idea of God as psychology, of psychological projection. And he has his own hypothesis, the scientific theory, if you will. I'll read you a few snippets from Totem and Taboo. He says, "But if we associate the translation of the totem as given by psychoanalysis with the totem feast and the Darwinian hypothesis about the primal state of human society, a deeper understanding becomes possible and a hypothesis is offered which may seem fantastic, I would agree, but which has the advantage of establishing an unexpected unity among a series of hitherto separated phenomena." I think that in modern philosophy and thought, So often, individual minds were trying to come up with rules or laws or mechanisms to explain extremely complex things, diverse things, with a single framework, a single mechanism. Kant wanted to have his laws like Newton had his laws. Freud and others do the same type of thing. Freud says there is only a violent, jealous father who keeps all the females for himself and drives away all the growing sons. He thinks that in primordial humanity, perhaps when we were still primates but not fully human, that in this tribe, that this father was taking all the females for himself for sex, for reproduction. And the sons got older, got horny, but had no females. And so out of anger, the fathers one day, the expelled brothers, because they were expelled from the tribe. By the way, this is what Freud speculates was sort of the origin of homosexuality. The brothers expelled from the tribe, couldn't have sex with females, and so they would experiment with each other. One day, the expelled brothers joined forces, slew and ate the father. They hated the father who stood so powerfully in the way of their sexual demands and their desire for power, but they also loved and admired him. After they had satisfied their hate by his removal and had carried out their wish for identification with him, the suppressed tender impulses had to assert themselves. This took place in the form of remorse, a sense of guilt. The deed now done becomes stronger than the living had been. They undid their deed by declaring that the killing of the father, substitute the totem, was not allowed, and renounced the fruits of their deed by denying themselves the liberated women. The father had been removed, and nothing in reality could make up for this. But sexual need does not unite men, it separates them. So, later he says, if they wanted to live together, but to erect the incest prohibition, they created religion. The totem religion had issued from the sense of guilt of the sons as an attempt to palliate this feeling and to conciliate the injured father through subsequent obedience. All later religions proved to be attempts to solve the same problem, varying only in accordance with the stage of culture in which they are attempted and according to the paths which they take. Freud, in his very scientific hypothesis, thinks that we basically have a cosmic Oedipus complex. Why do humans throughout history, most cultures today, know that the sacred exists? Why do people like Aristotle or Plato, or I would say Lao Tzu, or many native chiefs here or people in Africa, even now, are they aware that something like the spiritual realm exists? That something like what we mean by God exists? Well, it's because their ancestors killed and ate their father, so they didn't have to have as much homosexual sex. Voila, SKYDADDY. So, is this science? No. Freud says this: this primal state of society has nowhere been observed. Often atheists think that they are atheists because of science. I find that this is almost never the case. So I was never fully an atheist, but I wrestled with this on and off, here and there, until I slowly began to piece together the bigger picture. I'm responsible for my mistakes, as you are. But what I want to say also is the reason so many people are inclined towards atheism is not because they've memorized the periodic table, is not because they understand calculus-based physics. It's not because they know about elliptical orbits and planets, or they know about mass or germ theory. That's actually not why people are becoming atheists. For a long time, more and more, Western societies have trended towards materialism, deism, a reducing and walking back, I would say, of the sacramental worldview of our ancestors. I think that the historic Christian view was able to hold all things. It was able to hold the beliefs of the people as Christianity was spreading through Germany. It made sense to Germanic peoples to become Catholic at some point because there was an integrated synthesis of ideas. But from the late 1500s through the 1600s, there has been a rolling back of that integrated sacramental view. And now we are reduced to being workers and consumers. Think about what you spend your time doing. I would venture to say most of your waking hours, you're either producing or you're consuming. Entertainment, fast food, products. We've been reduced from the full humanity that we were born with, that our ancestors knew about. People live more in isolation, more with less understanding of the past or of an integrated culture which they can be a part, and they're looking for things elsewhere. Add on top of that, a lot of people have had bad experiences with abusive priests or pastors or overly rigid man-made rules imposed upon them, and they deconstruct from that after some time. Unfortunately, often when they do that, they then turn back their rather angry, narrow-minded, small attitudes about these things back at religious people and against religion. They say, you believe in a SKYDADDY. Any God that could be described as a SKYDADDY isn't a God that I believe in either. But this is not what Aristotle was getting at when he had his discussions about metaphysics, or what Plato was getting at when he discussed the One. The Catechism of the Catholic Church says about atheism, the name atheism covers many different phenomena. One common form is a practical materialism which restricts its needs and aspirations to space and time. I would agree with that. That is why so many of us feel inclined towards agnosticism, doubt, skepticism. Another form of contemporary atheism looks for the liberation of man through economic and social liberation. It holds that religion of its very nature thwarts such emancipation by raising man's hopes in a future life, thus both deceiving him and discouraging him from working for a better form of life on earth. The Catechism acknowledges that believers can have a part in this atmosphere to the extent that they are careless about the instruction in the faith, or present in its teaching falsely, or even fall in the religious, or moral, or social life. They must be said to conceal rather than reveal the true nature of God and of a religion. Atheism is often based on a false conception of human autonomy, exaggerated to the point of refusing any dependence upon God. Yet to acknowledge a God is no way to repose or oppose the dignity of man, since such dignity is grounded and brought to perfection in God. For the Church knows full well that her message is in harmony with the most secret desires of the human heart. I was surprised to see that all along the way in these philosophical, cultural things I was talking about for centuries, there were popes sort of warning the whole time. Think this through. If you're saying this, think through where this is going to lead. And I was a bit disconcerted when I was a Protestant to discover that they were right. So to the meme, is God a SKYDADDY? One, that is an assertion itself. Atheists often say, show me the evidence, show me the evidence. Show me the evidence that God is a SKYDADDY. That is not a neutral claim, that is a positive claim, for which, as Freud said, the primordial state of humanity hasn't been observed. It's not a scientific claim. And to say that these things have been repressed and shoved down into our consciousness eons ago, as Freud thought, is not a scientific claim. Even Feuerbach's claim is not a scientific claim. Rather, I think the reason so many people around the world believed in God, or gods, or the sacred, or the transcendent in any form, is because they were more of aware of things that we are now becoming more and more numb to. But there's hope, because so many people my age, younger and older, are more and more opening up to the reality that we need more than atheism. That there's value to religion, that religion has played a deep part in our cultural heritage, wherever you're from, in the philosophical underpinnings of our systems of law, that it adds meaning to our lives and it makes sense of so many things. So I don't think atheism is going away anytime soon, but I would say the new atheism is going to die out, probably with people my age, and that more and more people are realizing what we've lost. And on that note, as friendly as I can, as honest as I can, man to man, human to human, friend to friend, I ask you to consider repenting, believing the gospel, reconsider Christ, and then when you've done that, be baptized, as Peter said, every one of you, for the remission of sins. But whatever happens in society, I hope you know that your life matters. God loves you, someone loves you and misses you when you're gone. So don't check out early. Live your life to its fullest. As always, thanks for watching. God bless.